Hello and welcome to another episode of Statford Bridge, Chelsea by the Numbers. Short episode, Club World Cup episode. Um, and I'm going to do Club World Cup episodes because I think this tournament is getting a bad rap for many like obvious reasons in relation to the Saudi funding behind it, and it's a lot of extra games and blah 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 blah. And I never liked the old Club World Cup because it was too short and like the European teams came in like the semifinal, so it was like a waste of everybody's time. And I think like this much bigger, but every 4 years version of the tournament, especially when you have such a big prize pool, the teams actually seem to care. Like Chelsea put out basically a first choice lineup. Atleti and PSG put out basically first choice lineups. The non-European teams have like fought like hell in their games. The Miami Al Ali game has finished 0-0, but was like end to end. Bayern put out a first choice lineup. Palmeiras Porto was really fun. Botafogo Seattle was really fun. Flamengo Tunis was really fun. Like these teams are trying really hard. The crowds aren't great. Like when you put Chelsea at 3 p.m. on a work day, crowd's not going to be great. But I think there's like some redeeming qualities of this tournament. Chelsea put out a pretty first choice lineup. With the exception of they started Romeo Lavia over Enzo Fernandez in midfield. They took off Lavia and James at halftime. Chelsea were very comfortable in the first half of this game. It finishes like 2 to 0.8 on XG. It was 1 to basically 0 in the first half. The goal is a really, really lovely movement to score. They created a couple decent chances, but not like amazing chances outside of that. But really, they gave up nothing in transition. And then in the second half, it was a bit more end-to-end. Enzo Fernandez scores a quite nice goal off of a Liam Delap cross, and there's some dangerous transitions, mostly arising from Malo Gusto being like just getting rinsed by Dennis Bouanga, who is a very, very good MLS winger. And was like he was an okay Liga winger. Like he was a Liga average winger, and he just absolutely lit Malo Gusto on fire. But from a Chelsea perspective, like the only interesting takeaway from this game for me was mostly that Jackson was like pretty good in terms of running and being high energy and chasing things and linking things and closing down. And then he hit that point in the second half that he hits pretty often because like the roles he's asked to do are pretty physically demanding at like 60-65 minutes, where he starts to decline and the number of high intensity sprints goes down and he's a little bit slower to trigger his press. And as soon as that happened, Chelsea brought on Liam Delap, and the first thing Liam Delap did was come on and absolutely run somebody over for a foul. And I think one of the things, you can go and watch the Liam Delap video. I think that he has some pretty strong limitations as a player. One of those limitations I thought would be that he would be extremely lacking as a creator, and he puts in a lovely cross for an assist. So like maybe that'll be wrong. But the biggest benefit that I thought would be larger than just the pure impact of the quality of him as a player is that if Jackson is having a bad day, you can play a real striker. And if Jackson gets tired, you can bring on someone else who is high energy, run the channels, do your thing for 30 minutes. And for center backs, like Jackson is a very tough matchup for center backs. He does not give you a moment to breathe. He runs in behind a lot. He closes you down. He chases lost causes. He's all arms and legs and pushing and shoving and physical. Like, that's what he is. You're not coming out of it happy having played him. And now you bring him off and you bring on like this ogre of a man who just wants to fight you in Liam Delap. And I think that is going to be tremendously valuable for Chelsea this season. And like Chelsea faded, brought Delap on, and then Delap was like a pretty consistent outball the other way, which I thought was really nice. Some other interesting things from this game, Nkunku came on as a 10 for Palmer. That was an interesting change. I thought he actually looked pretty good in his short minutes. And Dario Isugo came on and for like 10 minutes at the end and had like a little bit of pop. Like The guy runs and he tackles people and he wins the ball, and I think that's pretty valuable. What I want to talk about just for 5 minutes beyond this game, Chelsea play Flamengo on Friday. That'll be their hardest group game. Flamengo also won 2-0. Flamengo are one of the best teams in Brazil. They're coached by Felipe Luis, former Chelsea left back. They have some names you would recognize that regularly play. Georgian Darasqueta played for Palace, I think, for a year, but was like a big football manager name. Luis Araujo used to play for Lille. Obviously, Jorginho is there. That, I think, is kind of the main ones that you would know. Everton, I think, played for Porto for a while. That's kind of the main group of guys you're talking about. But the thing that I wanted to talk about and why I think the Club World Cup is fun and why I think it's actually really interesting, particularly for Chelsea, who Chelsea's ethos and recruitment strategy is now heavily focused on player trading. Not that it's ever not been, but it's very focused on, like, we're going to find the deals in the market. And one of the things that you have to be really good at to do that well is you have to be really good at projecting league translation. You have to be really good at saying, I look at Estevao in Brazil and the metrics he's putting up as a 17-year-old and think actually that he's going to be this in the Premier League at 20. Like, Estevao is 35 million euros up front, add-ons all the way up to 65. Estevao is something like a 0.6, 0.7 XG plus XA guy in Brazil at 17. If he's going to be a 0.6, 0.7 XG plus XA guy in the Premier League at 20, 65 million euros is like half of what he should cost. And so if you think that you can project out league translation better than other people, that's a huge advantage. And one of the ways that people do league translation is looking at things like ELO. ELO is a chess thing. It basically, everybody starts at 1,200, and then you get a score whether you win or lose. If you beat someone below you, you get less points than if you beat someone above you, and vice versa. If you lose to someone below you, you lose more than you would lose to someone who's better than you. And it gives you kind of a ranking of team ability. Opta use that to create their power rankings. There's a really good paper by Daniel Dinsdale and Joe Gallagher who use those power rankings to measure league translation across a bunch of metrics. They kind of use Jeremy Doku to Liverpool as like an example. This is in 2021. And then they also use it to show like recommended replacements. On that replacement list are guys like Kvicha Kvaratskhelia, who, like, we all know what Kvicha is now. And this is like doing it with just ELO turned into a 1 to 100 ranking is pretty rudimentary. Like, there are probably better ways to do this now. But even if you look at their target metrics using their predictions versus the baseline, like, just modeling lead transition this way, you get significantly more accurate predictions. This is a little bit small for you on the screen, but you're looking at something like 50% more accurate predictions than their baseline, which I think is just, I think their baseline is they have the same numbers as they did before. So again, like, tremendously valuable. And so one of the ways, as I said, these ELO models work is that they calculate your score based on games versus good and bad. The problem is when we're talking about global ELO is that the problem with global ELO is that there are very few intercontinental games where European teams play South American teams very infrequently. They almost always play them at the Club World Cup. They play African teams, they play Asian teams very infrequently. And then you're really relying on like what people call node games, which are like your whole league translation model hangs on not very many games. And a lot of those games might be friendlies, and like friendlies are very difficult to include in something like this because how much are people trying? Did they play their best teams? Blah, 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 blah. Man United lost to like the Thai All-Stars. What does that do for your model? And so now you have this tournament where you have, through 3 days, you have an Asian team playing a North American team. You have a European team playing an Oceania team. You have 2 European teams playing. You have Europe versus South America. You've got South America versus America. You've got America versus Europe. And you have all these different combinations already in games that everyone is playing mostly starters, and everyone is trying to win and playing like they're trying to win. Like, there are tons of yellows and tons of fouls in these games. You're going to get really, really high quality league information. Like, people are going to look at Chelsea LAFC and, like, this game finishes 2.8 on XG. Chelsea are ultimately pretty comfortable. But you look at this and you're like, Chelsea played all their starters against an MLS team, a good MLS team. LAFC are one of the best. A good MLS team. Off of travel at the end of their season and blah, 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 blah. And it was a competitive match. Like, this looked very similar to much of their Conference League games. So now you say, okay, like, where does MLS rank? Like, a lot of times I get, like, where would the best MLS team finish in England? And the answer I have is, like, depending on how good they are that year, they're somewhere between like playoff championship and like relegation fighter Premier League. And you look at this and you're like, yeah, that is probably correct. Like, they're a high-end championship team, like many of the teams, like Copenhagen and like Heidenheim and like Genk and Panathinaikos and like all of these teams that Chelsea played in the Conference League, many of which Chelsea did worse against or somewhat better, but similar performances. And so I think that's very cool. I'm also like a nerd, so I get it. But I think that's going to be a really, really fun thing. And don't be surprised if you start seeing a lot of people talk on Twitter or wherever you find your analytics news about how to model league translation from, say, South America to Europe, or someone like Esteval, given a lot of what we get from this game. And if we're going to talk about Esteval to finish us off on one last thing, Palmeiras comfortably outplayed Porto with basically an identical XG scoreline to our game against LAFC. And Esteval, I thought, was very good. He put up 0.9 XG in 65 minutes with 3 penalty box shots. And if that's what he's going to be against Porto, the kid is going to be just fine. Anyways, we're going to wrap it up there. I'll give another episode, I don't know, at some point after the second, maybe the third group game, because I never like putting them out on the weekends. But as always, enjoy the soccer.